As a book editor, I'll often reference Avatar: The Last Airbender's animated series Prologue as one of the most efficient and effective prologues that I've ever come across. Hey, this is the Sword and the Pen Reflections. It is my casual alternative to the formal channel, The Sword and the Pen, link up there. For those of you who are new, I'm a freelance book editor who often discusses story adaptations across mediums. And this is my first video in a series covering Avatar: The Last Airbender, the animated series from 2005, and what I think are its core elements that need to be carried over into the live-action adaptation, which comes out in just a couple months. In this video, I'll explain why I believe that the live-action series should have a prologue very similar to the one that we got in the animated series, that is the Book 1, Episode 1 prologue. Then I'm gonna casually break it down line by line to point out all that it accomplishes and how. I might also give some of my thoughts on what I think the live action could maybe do differently. So let's dive right in. First off, as I stated, I believe that the live action series should have a prologue very similar to, if not a direct line-for-line translation of the one that we got in the animated series. I don't believe this of the whole series, but I do for the prologue. As a book editor, I'll often reference Avatar: The Last Airbender's animated series Prologue as one of the most efficient and effective prologues that I've ever come across. In a lot of animation, you'll find really efficient pacing and storytelling, and Avatar is no exception. This is because it takes so much time and effort to produce animation, especially 2D animation, and some of the higher quality CGI animations too. The writers have to be really creative in coming up with as many ways as possible to convey information in a very short space of time, without just resorting to, exposition, just saying it all out to the audience. It takes a real master storyteller to plan and execute a good animated story, because seconds of animation could take months to create. Case in point, these 4 seconds of footage from Hayao Miyazaki's The Wind Rises took 15 months to animate. Another animated feature, The Thief and the Cobbler by Richard Williams, took 30 years because it was constantly going over budget and over time to produce the incredibly complex 2D animation. Now imagine your job is to write a script for an animation where seconds could take months to produce. You better be efficient. And while I don't think it took that long to animate Avatar, you can tell that they did put a lot of effort into it, especially with animating the accurate movements of the martial arts that I know were modeled for them by a real martial arts master. That could not have been a small task. So when it came to the prologue, they didn't waste any opportunities to convey information to the audience. What is the job of a prologue exactly? Well, people are gonna have different ideas of what it should do, but for the most part, it's supposed to convey information to your reader or to your audience that they need to know in order to have context for what is going on the first moments of the story that you tell after the prologue. I know that's not applicable to every prologue that you've seen, but for the most part, that's what a prologue is supposed to be doing. But there is another purpose, and that is to grab the attention of your audience right away. Now, I'm sure we've all read those books where they have a prologue that is just a big long chunk of history text and we find it kind of boring. It's really hard to get away with that, especially today. I'm not saying that this is terrible, I'm just saying that for the current readership out there, this is not one that sells big, because you gotta interest your audience right away. And the prologue for the animated series does that, and does it so quickly. So let's take a look at it. It's about 70 seconds long, so 10 seconds over 1 minute, and it contains dialogue, images, music, and sound effects. It covers the whole spectrum of information that a story conveys to a readership. That is world building, characters, tone, theme, and the start of plot. And in so many ways, it grips the attention of the audience so that they want to know what happens next. Now, for the live action adaptation, more than 70 seconds is going to be necessary. Live action needs a lot more time to breathe than animation for it to feel organic in its more reality-grounded medium. But I don't think they really need to cover any additional information, at least not explicitly. Now, from what we've seen in the teaser that was recently released, I think they might be putting Sozin's Comet in there, but I hope they only plan to show it without any kind of explanation for what it is or why it's there. Because we discover midway through book 1 of the animated series that this comet is sort of a secret weapon of the Fire Nation that Aang is informed of by Avatar Roku. But anyway, the reason I think you want to have a lot of information conveyed efficiently is because of how quickly it not only grounds your audience, but establishes hooks. Now, in the animated prologue, you not only get a genre hook reaching out to a specific target audience, like literally within the first 10 seconds, but it also establishes a story hook with stakes, which a lot of writers find really hard to do without blowing their big surprise. And a story hook with stakes is the best kind of story hook. In storytelling, you want to grab your audience and orient them as early as possible, especially if the next beat in your story is a bit slower, like 2 kids in a canoe fishing in the South Pole. The animated series already did all of this work, and did it masterfully.
And as I always say, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
But anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at the prologue and break it down line by line, looking at everything that it accomplishes and how. Okay, right out of the gates, water, earth, fire, air. What are we getting from this? Well, visually, we can see that this is a martial world fantasy. I mean, it's obvious from the movements that these characters are doing that we're seeing martial arts. Now, this is a genre hook right away, telling us that people who enjoy martial arts are probably going to enjoy this story. And rather obviously, it shows us that this is a fantasy because each one of these representatives of their particular element is doing their form of bending: water, earth, fire, and air. So, elemental magic system. There you go. This is going to appeal to people who enjoy fantasy, especially if they like elemental magic systems. But we also get lots of world building information out of these first 10 seconds. So for each one of these elements, you can see that the costumes that these characters are wearing are different. So the waterbender looks like he's wearing a fur-lined parka. So we can assume that this is coming from a colder climate. The earthbender, shirtless and barefoot. So warmer climate, and we'll find out much later on that the barefootedness is about being close to the element. For the firebender, there's lots of sharp points and edges to the costume, and the character even starts in sort of a very upright, almost at attention posture. And for the airbender, they don't even start out on screen. They jump into it, and there's a whirling motion. You can see that there's a cape. So a costume that's going to react to the wind a lot. And probably one of my favorite things that's conveyed through this first 10 seconds is a rudimentary explanation of the magic system. So we can all see that it's based on real martial arts forms, movements that you would see in East Asian martial arts. But not just any martial arts forms. There's a style for each one of these elements. The waterbender's movements are fluid, and you can see that the movement of the water corresponds to the movement of the bender. The earthbender's movements are very, I wouldn't say rigid, but strong and direct, straightforward. The firebender's movement is sort of slashing, cutting, almost you would feel like this is a very powerful move, but that it will be a little bit closer to something like you would see almost in waterbending where it flows, but it's going to be rigid like you would see with earthbending. It's like somewhere between. And then with airbenders, they come flying in from off screen and it's a whirling motion. So you see that all of the elements have movements that kind of represent the elements themselves. So you would be able to see someone, even if they weren't manipulating an element, you would see them do a motion and you would probably be able to tell yourself, I can see that looks like an earthbender type of move, or that looks like an airbender type of move. So think about how subtly that has conveyed this information to the audience. In just 10 seconds, you got all that information. It's pretty dang impressive. Then immediately after that, we get a map of the world. And as we're sailing through, now I love that the camera pushes in and the map goes from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional, and our perspective is sort of sailing through the mountains. And we get a bit of a history lesson, or like an establishment of this is how this world works. My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days, a time of peace, when the Avatar kept balance between the water tribes, Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, and air nomads. So we see what stasis is for this world, that there are 4 different types of cultures that we need to be keeping in mind. And they were listed off, and the hints about what type of cultures they are in the way that they are categorized in this prologue. So water tribes, so a tribal people, earth kingdom. So we're expecting that we're going to see a monarchy with perhaps other smaller kings that are beholden to the High King. And then there's the Fire Nation, which is much, I think, more capable of spreading and growing than perhaps, say, a kingdom. And then lastly, the air nomads. Nomads travel about, which, you think about it, I don't think that was talked about a whole lot with the air nomads and their history. We were told that they were nomads, but I don't know if we ever actually saw them being nomads. I know that they weren't in the first 3 seasons, the Aang arc, but maybe if we had a little more information about how the monks would travel from each of the air temples, like they were constantly traveling about, that would have been interesting. Anyway, let's get back to this. Please like, subscribe, and comment, even if it's just with an emoji. It's a free way to support the channel. Or if you're feeling really generous, check out my Patreon, Ko-fi, or hit the money heart thanks button. You can even leave me a one-time tip. Information is in the description and below. But then there's also the information about the Avatar character. And even though nothing is told about, what this character's special powers are just yet, we get the idea that there is one uniting figure among all of the different kingdoms, and that this was a time of peace when he was around. Then the camera lands on the beach, and we see that some very obviously Fire Nation ships with the also sharp edges to them have landed on a beach, and there's columns of soldiers, and very uniformly, I don't know what you would call this sort of emotion, but they perform an attack of firebending directly towards the camera. And I love this because you can see the militaristic behavior of the Fire Nation right here. It's like, this is how the world views the Fire Nation. And now we, as the audience seeing the Fire Nation for the first time, are seeing it the way the most of the world sees them as well. Invaders. They came from across the ocean. They're very organized, highly militaristic. Their ships are industrial. Later when we see other parts of this world, we're going to see, wait a minute, because the first place we see is, at least if the live action is going to follow what the animation does. What the animation does is we start out in the North Pole, and this is a very, people living in igloos, and you don't see use of machinery. So to see that the world was sort of taken prisoner by these very industrialized people, that gives us this sense that they're highly advanced, and they're using their technology to gain power in an aggressive sort of way. But yeah, I love that. And just personally, I really enjoy that you can see what appears to be the sunrise coming from behind the ships, or maybe it's the sunset, like it's the days of peace are closing down. Then we get our explanation of why the Avatar was so important and was able to do what he did. It says, only the Avatar mastered all 4 elements. Only he could stop the ruthless firebenders. So a figure that we knew, whose job is to keep everybody united, would have done so by keeping aggressors like this at bay from, taking over the rest of the world. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. And I actually really like that it's not clear from this prologue what came first, the chicken or the egg, the Fire Nation invaders or the vanishing of the Avatar, because that's something that we don't have clarified to us until much later in season 1 with the episode of The Storm. Then we're told that 100 years have passed and the Fire Nation is nearing victory in the war. So we know that it's been a very long time, generations have come and gone, and we see the world on fire. You can see villages in the mountains that are burned down. So we have an establishment of our protagonists and antagonists right away. Well, at least our antagonists. We know that the Fire Nation is bad. It's not that they just landed on the beach and decided to attack, it's that they are destroying everything in their path. The world has been steeped in this conflict with the Fire Nation for 100 years, and the Fire Nation is winning. They are nearing victory. And now we get more definition of our narrator, who we have been getting information about up until now very, very subtly. So Katara is the voice of the narrator, and I would love it if they did Katara in the prologue, if Katara was the narrator in the prologue for the live action. I think that would be wonderful because we get a lot of information about her just from this prologue. So it starts out with her telling that her grandmother used to tell her stories about how there was a time of peace. And so we know that she's very close with her family. Her grandmother was part of her growing up. Then we get this bit of information. 2 years ago, my father and the men of my tribe journeyed to the Earth Kingdom to help fight against the Fire Nation. And the image that we see are of the Water Tribe ships sailing off into the icebergs. I love it. It's a very nice image. This tells us who is leading the fight against the Fire Nation. It's the Earth Kingdom, right? They are leading. And the Water Tribe is helping. So very brave people going off to help fight with the Earth Kingdom. But it's also giving us a subtle hint that the Airbenders are not involved in defending the world. And we don't know why that is. It is so subtle. You really wouldn't pick this up unless you reread it and you go, oh yeah, there were supposed to be airbenders in this world too. And the second half of this sentence, leaving me and my brother to look after our tribe. We know that Katara and Sokka were part of leadership in their tribe, and they have been left by their father. So their father and the men of the tribe left, and the two of us are in positions of responsibility for the rest of our tribe. And I think that this may have been something that Katara believed, she and her brother sort of believed, but we do see that the brother takes this very seriously later. So this is nice. This is sort of, when we see Sokka behaving this way later on in the first episode where he's, rallying the other kids and saying, no, we have to defend the village, you understand why that is. Because their father and the men of their tribe journeyed to help fight, and they left Katara and her brother to look after the tribe. Again, very subtle bit of information being delivered there about Katara's and Sokka's upbringing. Also, no mention of a mother. So nice job there. This will become important later on. And I just have to say that I really love the visual that we get here of Sokka holding up a lamp. And actually it's all of the Water Tribe people holding up lamps in the night, and Katara sort of clinging onto Sokka, and you can see that there's unease and fear in their eyes, and maybe even a weariness of this is the way that it is and it doesn't feel right. It's wonderfully done. I would love to see this. I know there's a lot of complaints about the M. Night Shyamalan live action, but he did pay homage to this particular image, and I think it was the right thing to do. This is such a wonderful, powerful image. You're getting our brother and sister. They only have each other, and their lives are about to change forever. So we immediately have sympathy for them, losing their father, being alone, having this great burden put up on both of them, and you can see it in their eyes. And I like that there is the lantern being held up, as if holding up a lantern to watch the men sail off, or perhaps this small lantern of hope, which we get in the next little bit. Some people believe that the Avatar was never reborn into the air nomads and that the cycle is broken. So more information about the world here and about the Avatar himself. We know that it is a cycle of rebirth, and that he was supposed to appear among the nomads, that he was supposed to be born into the air nomads, but that we don't know for sure if that's what happened. And so maybe we think that the cycle is broken. So reincarnation, we know, is going to be part of this story as well. But I haven't lost hope. I still believe that somehow the Avatar will return to save the world. And for those of us who are fans of the animated series, we know what Katara's deal is. Even though most of the world has lost hope, she hasn't. She believes that the Avatar will return to save everyone. I really, really love that that information is given in the prologue. We are literally told who our narrator is in this prologue. And it's done so nicely, so seamlessly in delivering the information about the state of the world. We don't even really know that it's happening. A nice positive aspect about a character. We weren't told about this as somebody who's lost hope. This is somebody who has it. So we're looking forward to what is going to happen. It's much harder to create an interest in looking forward to something bad that's going to happen that's depressing, like lost hope. But I like this. This is a looking forward to the future, so the audience looks forward to the future too. And then I do have to make a note about the change in the music, and it just enhances what we're seeing on the screen. So a beautiful sort of mystical sound in the very beginning, but then as soon as the Fire Nation is introduced, it changes. It sounds more like battle drums, almost like doom has arrived. So getting back to our hook with stakes, we know that, okay, the world will surely lose the war and be burned down, like we see in the mountains with these villages burning down, if the Fire Nation is not stopped. And the Avatar is the one who can do it. He's the only one who can stop the Fire Nation. But he has vanished. So we have a mystery that we want solved. Where did he go? Why did he disappear? And we have why it's so important that he comes back. Because if he doesn't, we're gonna burn. The whole world's gonna be under the power of the Fire Nation, and what does it look like when the world's under the power of the Fire Nation? Well, according to this prologue, it's all on fire. But anyway, so I really do think that the live action would do good to copy this prologue almost line for line. I can't really think of any additional information that you would want to put in it. You could maybe portray things differently than they are in the prologue. For instance, I think from the teaser we've seen that we're going to actually witness the attack on the air temples by the Fire Nation when Sozin's comet came 100 years ago. I really hope that they don't spoil that the Avatar disappeared in a storm. I hope that they don't spoil that in the prologue, because that is a driving mystery from this prologue, and it should last at least to halfway through the first season. So we want to know, Aang, why did you disappear? Why weren't you there 100 years ago? Why were you not on the battle lines, like saying, hey, Fire Nation, stop? So don't give it away in the prologue, because that's a nice mystery to keep us interested. And then it's shortly after that revelation in the animation that we get the explanation of what Sozin's comet is. And then this is the driving force going forward, because now we go, okay, we found out what happened to Aang and why. Now, what is going to keep us going forward? Well, holy cow, Sozin's comet, which helped the Fire Nation defeat the air nomads in the very beginning 100 years ago, is coming back. And Avatar Aang needs to be Avatar Aang. He needs to know all of the four elements. He needs to be a master of them before that day comes, because it's going to be bad news if it comes again. They're going to use it to wipe out possibly the Earth Kingdom at that point. Another thing that I think that the live action could do that I would love to see would be the departure of Katara and Sokka's father with the men of the Water Tribe. Now we get this nice still image in the prologue, well, two still images of the men leaving on the ships, and then of course the village being left behind. But I think it would be really nice to see those moments with their father, how badly they don't want him to leave, how brave Sokka is trying to be. We do get to see the flashbacks in much later episodes where we get to see Sokka remembering wanting to go with his father, and then the father charging him with staying and protecting the village. But I think that would be nice to see here, and I don't think it would spoil too much. I think maybe don't have too much dialogue in here, but we can have almost like moving images at least of what we're seeing. And in the part where we see the mountains and the villages on fire, I think that we could see the Earth Kingdom battling against the Fire Nation, up in the hills or maybe in fields. It doesn't really matter where, but that would be an area to show more action. And it might actually be too much to show the Fire Nation attacking the temples and then showing them attacking the Earth Kingdom. It might be just like, okay, we're just watching battlefront after battlefront. It might feel a little bit repetitive. So maybe put something else of the fire, what's happening in the villages in the Earth Kingdom. Maybe Earth Kingdom villages are evacuating completely and moving into the cities, which will be really important for season 2, because we know that in the rings of Ba Sing Se are actually, I don't even know if it was as exactly explained, but I think it's something that just watching I picked up on, that probably the people living in the outer rings of Ba Sing Se are going to be refugees, people who have come from the little rural areas that they couldn't protect themselves, so their only choice was to hightail to Ba Sing Se, and where do they put them? In the outer rings. It would be like slums, basically. Anyway, that's it. I think if I get too much further into it, this video will go on forever. But I think that I've articulated how incredible this prologue is. I mean, if you can accomplish this much in such a short space of time and then immediately get into your narrative, this is what you should do. And I mean, you not only told us about the world, but about a character that we can root for. We're going to get into the first scene after the prologue knowing who Katara is. We recognize her voice. We know about her situation with her brother. They were charged by their father to take care of the village. So even though they're out fishing, we know why they're fishing. They're fishing not just, because this is what we do in our spare time, but because they have to. This is how they help keep the village going, is they're going out and fishing for food. I would really love to see that the live action does appreciate how much information was given to us in the animation and perhaps take their cues from that. I mean, I think it would be smart to just do it. Just do the prologue. Just take all of that. You can reword it, say it a little bit more flowery, add a little bit here and there. That's fine. I don't think you have to, but you can. And I think it would be smart of them to do, because I don't see how they could improve upon what's already there. But yeah, those are just my thoughts. So tell me what yours are. Do you think that there's any other information that should be included in the prologue? Or maybe something that should be left out? Let me know about it in the comments. In my next video, I'll be talking about adapting world building, which will include the magic system, if this is a fantasy, or the technological capabilities and abilities, which are two separate things, of science fiction. So be sure to check back soon for that. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If you're feeling super generous, check out my Patreon, Ko-fi, or hit the money heart thanks button down below. And be good to yourself.